We are really grateful to be a part of this, and thank you for having us and letting us come. The sales of our Thistle Farms products have been abysmal. What? This is an Episcopal conference. This is where we make our cash. So, we have a chance to make that right. Don't worry. But we are coming to you. This is our first conference since we have rebranded and relabeled everything to make our products even more beautiful for all your church bathrooms and offices. The candles are even more holy for your altars. The healing oils are more healing for your anointing. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. So just please mob us when you're out. I am privileged to be here today with Conley Penley, who is literally my boss assistant. She is the advisory president of the board at St. Augustine's Chapel, where I've served for about 25 years as a chaplain at Vanderbilt University. When everybody was talking about, does anybody have issues with authority? And it was like, you don't stay a chaplain for 25 years unless you have major issues. The only committee I think I've ever been appointed to in my diocese is one time I was appointed to the Insurance and Property Committee. Really using my gifts and talents. And I'm here with Tiffany, who is at the table. Tiffany, this is one of my favorite things. On the last trip we took together, defined herself as a country thug. She is amazing and came to us through the Magdalene on the Inside program, meaning that the communities of women started gathering on the inside of prison. She came out, and she has a real eye for detail, a real ability to see the bigger picture within manufacturing, and has moved up in our bath and body care company to do a lot of supervision. And you'll hear tomorrow from the other person in our team that's here, Regina, who was one of the first 5 residents 20 years ago, and now she is one of the co-directors of the National Outreach Program, helping other cities start similar communities. And I think, where's Houston? What, you want to say a little bit? Where are y'all on the journey?
We're just getting started in Austin and just identified the house and gotten the down payment, and so we're working closely with Regina to start our community there.
And Chicago's here?
We don't have our house yet, but we're working towards it hopefully within this year.
So we have a beautiful outreach and community for long-term housing models for women who are survivors. And what I wanted to do today was, I'm not going to say that Andy Doyle stole or cheated off me for his keynote, but I will say I was going to talk about the Good Samaritan. And, you know, I guess you would be remiss not to talk about it in context of missional work. But, you know, for me, when I started out on this journey, my dad was an Episcopal priest. He was killed when I was little by a drunk driver. And then my abuse started in the church by the guy that took over for my dad. And so I think I always heard the story of the Good Samaritan knowing I was the guy in the ditch. And that's been my approach to ministry all these years. And when Stephanie was talking about gratitude, there's nothing like the gratitude for somebody that's known what that ditch is like and how people can love you and bring you back into community from that place. And, you know, it was amazing that the church that was the place, you know, that my dad was a missioner at, that had been killed, who you know, had this abuse happen. It was fairly dysfunctional. When I was going off to college, they sold the church to a Kroger grocery store. Kroger bought it. And the diocese came out and they had a service to deconsecrate the space. And even at that age, I knew that that was a waste of time, that that place had been deconsecrated years ago. And that finally that land was going to be used for something useful. And I also knew that wasn't the whole story, so it's always been about context for me. That all the beautiful liturgy and all the beautiful language and all the stuff that we do is, like 1 Corinthians says, a clanging cymbal if it's not put into action in love. That it's just hollow. And that what we need to do is put this idea of love into action, and that's wherever we are in the context that we are in. And I am well aware that I'm speaking to a group that's not just speaking to the choir, it's to the choir directors. I get that. That what y'all do and how you minister has been a formation, and you have helped many, many people like myself out of a ditch. And so when I'm talking about this, I hope what I'm doing is just reminding you of all the things that you practice and do, and maybe just oomping you up a little bit to go back out and do it again and again and again. In my mind, the only sacrament of the church is healing. That is the one sacrament of the church. There are 7 maybe prisms of how we see that sacrament, but from birth to death, there is this joy and this hope of healing, and that's the context that we want to put this missional work into, is the context of healing. And what healing looks like to me is not these, we're not promising miracle cures in justice or in sickness or whenever anything else. We're talking about this intentional way of walking towards wholeness together. This intentional way that we're walking towards wholeness together. And the way I've seen it in my life, that the best healing happens when you and I are able in ourselves and in others to transform brokenness into compassion. When I imagine the rest of the story of the Good Samaritan is he found this healing. And he came out of the place he stayed. And he helped heal another 100 Samaritans along the way. So, that is boring. Don't try to even read it. My slides aren't near as good, Andy. I swear, I'm sorry. No, stop, no. The point is, it's 20 years. That's what I want to say. That's the point of that slide for you, is it's 20 years. And we started small. If you look at the statistics around women who have survived sexual assault, it's staggering, 1 in 6 women, depending on which statistic you're looking at in the U.S. In the world, 20 million people are a part of human trafficking for sex and labor. They're staggering numbers. We could keep going. And you think, what difference does it make if we do this work and there's a house in Austin for 5 women, if there is a house in Chicago for 5 women, if there's a house in Nashville, Tennessee for 5 women. But when you start thinking about it, and I think about the work we did, we had to start small. And all it was a very simple model. And it's just like all this work, it's nothing new. That's what everybody keeps saying today, is that this is not where we have to come up with the 3 Ps or the 3 Cs, whatever the thing is, to inspire you. Okay, so here's all you got to do to be missional. You have to have purpose, precision, and pontification. Those are your 3 Ps. Or you have to have your 3 Cs, compassion, compelling, courage. Those are the 3 things, and then we've got it. This is old school stuff, and it's called community. And community becomes the healing entity. It is what holds us up, it holds us accountable, and forever people have come together to do this work. That's why we are all part of a congregation. It's a community. And it ends up that those communities really do change culture, they change language, they change legislation, and that's how it works. So you start small, I believe, in this missional work. If I was ever going to start out and think I am going to end prostitution, the buying and selling of women, human trafficking, I wouldn't get out of bed. And I think it's those kinds of fears that really, those fears leave dreams on the table to die. So start small, and then you stay with it. And you watch what love does. I am not very impressed in missional work with people that talk a lot about vision and inspiration, only because I don't have either one very much. But vision is not that big a deal. We all have visions. Who can't see a wheel on the wheel on a good cloudy day in the sky? I can see dragons and ships. You can too. But the beautiful thing is it's about a sweat equity. Missional work is a sweat equity work. And you trust that the inspiration will come. We were in, what's it called? Omaha, Nebraska in November. And I don't know if you've been to Omaha, Nebraska in November. And I love Omaha, Nebraska. I'm just talking about the way it looks. And I was thinking it really was about 49 shades of gray. And the sky was gray, the trees were gray, the grass was gray, the buildings were gray. It was a lot of gray. And I felt like, like all of us do in this missional work, I'm kind of done. I'm exhausted. And we are doing a lot of the same work over and over for the next person and the next person. And we worked hard there for 4 days. And one of the women that traveled with us, a woman named Sophia, who, like most of the women that comes into the program and community of Magdalene and Thistle Farms, was raped early. On average, we have women raped between 7 and 11, and they hit the streets between 14 and 16 years old. She left her foster home at 6th grade, never turned back. Spent the next close to 20 years in juvenile detention, then prison, because that's preschool for prison. And on the streets, under bridges. And she hadn't flown before, and we got there, and we did this work, and I was feeling exhausted, and we got back on the plane, and those spacious seats on the plane. It's like 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. We've worked 4 days out there, and Sophia is, I'm literally all up in my space. And I keep doing that, that silent dance with that seat thing. And I'm trying to, because she doesn't know it, because this is her first flight, so I'm trying to teach her about it. And all of a sudden, she has just decided to lean all the way over and just start taking pictures out the window. And what I didn't know was that it was the supermoon. And all of a sudden, the gray, when I looked out the window with her, was transformed, and everything was like, the clouds that were gray they had reds and deep purples in them, and there was a halo around the moon, and she's just snapping pictures and snapping pictures. And she turns and she looks at me and she says, I know this is crazy, but I never thought about there being a sky above the clouds. I'm good to do this work forever. The whole world changes when someone's world opens up. And as she goes out in the world and proclaims the great gratitude and missionary zeal of that good Samaritan, the guy in the ditch, I think that's what it's about. And so we can start small and we can stay long and we can keep going and trust that the work will continue to inspire us. If we are doing it well, the work will continue to inspire us. And if we do it in community where we don't feel like we have to have all the answers for ourselves or we're carrying the whole thing, that's never been the idea. The idea of bearing a cross isn't picking up something heavy and dragging it around. The idea of bearing a cross is bearing love, and it starts by falling in love. Bearing a cross starts by falling in love and finding others and joining together and bearing that love for one another and with one another. The last part of that, just this whole history thing, and I'll let it go. Start small, stay long, and the last one is don't hide your failures. Everybody knows y'all don't know what you're doing. Right? If somebody had a formula for how people recover, it would work. How people heal, how healing happens in this world, it's a practice. It's a ministry. So we go about it in that way, and love has as much to speak and say in the failures as it does in the successes. I spent years trying to hide it when somebody relapsed in our program, knowing that each time that was going to be the end of us. Somebody relapsed and went back to the truck stop. A trucker picked her up. This is 2 years into it. Tortured her for 4 hours, shot her execution style, and I was scared. Not just grieving her, I was scared that this was going to undo the women that we were working with, that the supporters would think, this is what I'm talking about. Priests shouldn't be doing this. Women don't change. Why are you doing that? She was just using you till she could go back out there. These issues are too hard and deep. These are some of the oldest ones in the world about sexual assault and abuse of women. It goes back all the way. How do we think we're going to make a difference? All those things happened over and over until finally, on this history in about 2010, when NPR said, your ship has come in, we're doing a national story on you. And as you know, if you're selling bath and body care products, it's good to have free national publicity. That was my favorite thing about the whole CNN thing. That was awesome. So, NPR comes down, they do the story, and we had horrible relapse from one of the women that did the story with them. It was the worst we have ever had. The woman that was a part of the community had come in and out of the program, and they wanted to talk to somebody that had been struggling, and she wanted to talk about how hard it is. She has that history of, her abuse starting with her own father around the age of 5, that kind of thing. I mean, just awful. So anyway, when she relapsed, she was with a group, and she was charged with homicide about 5 days before the NPR story came out. She was not convicted of it, but I'm saying before that story came out, we had never had that. We'd had women die, we have had women missing, we've had all kinds of stuff. It never had happened. And I was scared to death when that news went out. And so we called NPR just to ask them to pull the story. And they said they wouldn't pull the story, and in fact, they were going to end the story on that because it was so dramatic. And so, I listened to it. I was up speaking at a college in Connecticut, and no one called me from Thistle Farms for about 3 or 4 hours, and I was listening to it on my cell phone, and I had the first time in my life that fear of I wonder if you can kill a cell phone because there's so much sweat. Is there's enough water that it could actually kill your phone. So I was switching my phone over. I was so nervous. But what I learned from that whole experience, the reason Thistle Farms wasn't calling me is that they were bombarded with orders. And for some of the first time, we had to be working overtime for weeks to try to fill those orders. And what I learned is that if you are faithful in what you're doing, and you're honest about what it is that you're doing, and you're hopeful about what it is that you are doing, people can weep with you. And all those fears and judgments, those are in our heads. That was my voice. I had all those doubts and fears. People will hope with you. People will long with you. It's an amazing journey to be free from some of those fears and feeling like you have to protect your ministry. So 20 years later, dear God, we have a global program. We have partners all over the world. We have small communities of women starting and coming together to do work in their context. And this is what I have learned from that. Our first group that we started working with was a group of women survivors of the genocide back in 2007, 2008. Any fans of our bug spray here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's all you need right there. That's like Jesus had 12. We got 11, and Regina didn't wave your hand, 12. We got 12. We're good to go. We're going to make a global movement with this bug spray. So the reason is the women in Rwanda make geranium oil, and it's a powerful mosquito repellent. And they said, we need a U.S. distributor, we need some help. So we went over there, we started talking to the women, and it took us somewhere between a minute and a minute and a half. You know those times when you say, okay, I'll definitely do this. Like you think, I don't know. Okay. That's what it's like, isn't it? You meet people and you see the needs and you see the chance to work together and you're like, I'm in. Let's go. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? You know, you're doing so much. And really, honestly, we're not doing that much. We have time to come to a conference for 2.5 days. That's a gift. This is a luxury. A lot of people don't have this luxury. And, I think the more you're doing that work, honestly, the sermons write themselves. If you're stressed out about writing a sermon, do not go to a library. Go to a prison. That sermon will write itself in about 10 minutes when they lock that door. And you're on the other side of it. And you really start feeling what that's like. And you start hearing that gospel again, and your eyes start opening. So that's what it felt like when we were talking to all the survivors of the genocide, these beautiful women. 30 women, 1 million killed, 1994, in 100 days. 30 women coming together to develop this cooperative and go back out in those same fields where they had dug up the bones of their husbands, where they had been raped, where their children had been killed, went back out into those fields to plant something healing for the world. Hell yes, we're in. And after this, I hope a lot more than 12 people raised their hands, by the way. This bug spray, this is totally off the point, but this bug spray, is that okay to take 1 minute to do advertisement work? Okay. So this bug spray, we just did an independent test because we sold about 25,000 bottles of it in the last year. And we're hoping to double it this year because we're growing so fast. But this bug spray, we had to get it tested like this independent federal testing. And we beat Jessica Alba's Target brand. What's up? That is amazing. That is amazing. That we can do this work and we can do it real well. That was not the point. The point was that we were over there, fell in love, and we started bringing the geranium oil back here to develop products, and we were taking it around the country. We ended up in Houston, Texas, talking to a group of women in prison, and when we started passing out all our information, this is an August hot day. The Texas prison has no air conditioning. The Texas women in prison near Houston has no air conditioning. They work in turnip fields. It was very smelly in a room. It was about like this with these folks, this many folks. Passed out the information. The woman right on the front row, all she did is she took it and she laid it over her face and she just started breathing it in. She goes, what is this? This smells so good. And what had happened is that we were so excited about this advertising and getting this geranium out. We were carrying it with us everywhere. Some of it had gotten on the sheets that we were passing out. So what that means is that a group of women in Rwanda who survived genocide didn't give up and kept planting hope. And some of that came over to the U.S., where another group of women who have survived the inside of prisons and the undersides of bridges and the backside of anger and the short side of justice didn't give up and blended that into something healing and stamped Love Heals on it. And then it went on a plane, and then it made its way through a prison wall so a drop of it could be breathed in by a woman who needed a drop of hope. And you start thinking about that, and if a drop of oil can make that journey and have that kind of impact about all these resources we have and all this richness we have in all these ways we can do this ministry. And so it's crazy not to. If healing is the sacrament of the church, we can all add our drops of healing to that. And these little bits can make this huge difference and make these journeys that we never expected to even have in our lives. It is a privilege to get to do the missional work of the church. It is a privilege to think about doing the work of justice. So, in my mind, what I needed to start doing this missional work in context was a place. I needed place. I started out, they called me, and there was an opening for the Episcopal chaplain at Vanderbilt University. I went to visit. There were 6 people that were part of the congregation, and they said it was a full-time job. Are you called to campus ministry? And I was like, oh, hell yes. This is awesome. I can do whatever I want. Who's going to even know? Right? How's it going? Great. I'm doing great. I'm so many programs. And we started the Thistle Farms and Magdalene community. And what I realized, it's an A-frame chapel. It's on the fraternity row. Literally, we're across the street from the K house that has a cannon pointing at us. So it's not so much the Episcopal Church welcomes you, but we are a refuge if you get scared. And so when I got in there, the A-frame is really, really tall. And there were cobwebs all up in the very top of it, all blended in. They were there so long that they had collected dust, and they became an art piece. And I really felt like that's what I needed. I needed to be left alone long enough to weave my own web without a committee, where mostly the spirit goes to die. Well, you know the old joke, right? Like the whole thing of how many Episcopalians does it take to change the light bulb? Yeah. And in my mind, it's not that people don't want to change the light bulb. It's that you send it to committee to find out if that what kind of light bulb. And who's going to change it, and then what's the budget implications. And then, we have all this in place, and it's like, at the end, it's like, just use a candle. So I needed that. I needed to not be in committee. I needed to develop this idea of what community looks like for healing for women. 2 years free, no authority in the house. 2 years free, no authority in the house. I got it down to that. And I found people who would be supportive. And I knew I didn't want to take any federal or state money. I wanted everybody to give in gratitude for all the mercy they had known, all the times they had been in the ditch. We all know some of that ditch experience and what it means to be able to give from that place. So we did it, and we started, and it was the right thing to do. It became a lavish, like this spider web, a lavish model. It became an economic model that was sustainable. We ended up building one of our homes for $1 million for 8 women and proved to the whole city that you can do that, and you can do it. That's still half the cost of what it costs to keep a woman in prison for a year. It's cost us $44 a day for a woman to come into a free program to have everything she needs, dental, medical, educational, intensive outpatient therapy, prostitution rehabilitation classes, informed trauma therapy, all of those things, $44 a day, and you live in a beautiful home with Bosch appliances, bamboo floors, courtyards, and people get better. And in fact, we're at a point now where we can show on a piece of paper that just by us being in the city of Nashville, Tennessee, we give back to the city $1 million a year. You can do this in a lavish and beautiful way, but you need time and you need space and you need a community that doesn't just say, that will never work. You need people who go, that is so beautiful, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? When I started, one of the best things a priest ever did for me, he was at the, what did y'all call those churches that are rich? Huh? I can't remember. No, you were calling them the panel. Whatever it was, the rich church. I was not that. the people with money. And I mean economic money. I don't mean rich in any spiritual way. It could be. It could be. I just don't know that there's a correlation. I'm saying I think all of us have gifts. And when I started Magdalene Thistle Farms, my mom died the week we opened in 1997, the same week. And so I forgot to be able to go out and raise money. And you were asking me, what did you do? Because you didn't have enough money. You only have enough money for a year or whatever. And I was like, we were about a month into it and we didn't have any money. And I knew that we needed money to be able to pay for everything. And so Bob, the rector at St. George's, I went into his office and I said, I am grieving everything. I'm grieving my mama, I'm grieving my dad, I'm grieving all this just stuff in my life, and I need some help. And we have all these bills due, and I'm not going to be able to pay them, and I need help. He could have said anything to me, Bob Abstein. He could have said, you should have planned better, which I knew. You should have all these things. And you know what he said to me in that office, which saved my life? How much do you need? Isn't that the most merciful statement in the world when you're poor? How much do you need? And I was like, oh, just ask the right amount. You don't want to go too high. But you don't want to underbid yourself either. It's like this is an opportunity. So what I want to say about this is that this is my favorite part of missional work right there. It can be anything. It's in the middle of hope. It's in the middle of a dream. It's in the middle of a space where you can imagine something beautiful. You can imagine somebody on the streets is praying for a home to come to. And it's already being built. You can imagine yourself in there, 4 or 5 years, and you're crowded for space and you're getting ready to build something else. You can imagine the conversations. You can imagine the circle of women, all of it. And that's the part that I love, that it is really where a communal vision does its best work. And that's what I long for, is a communal vision where people come together and, somebody that has the skills is putting up the frame, and somebody else that has beautiful interior design skills brings that in. And you start doing this work in a communal way. It's not a committee way necessarily, because, if you put the design of what's going to happen in here to a committee, I promise you it's beige walls. Right? But what we try to say in this communal vision is I've got some really good ideas, and you've got some really good ideas. Let's all bring them together and support each other, and to remind people not everybody has the same gifts. They do not need me to pick out that paint color. That is not my job. My job is to tell the story. I know what my job is. And people know what their job is. And it's like people get confused. If you think it's your ministry, your vision, it will never get bigger than you. If you think this is your deal and you have all the best ideas, have fun with it, because I'm not interested. But if we're coming together and I can say, I know what your skills are. They are amazing and I don't have it. And I need you to support me in what my skills are. We can do this, and we can build some dream that none of us could have imagined by ourselves. That's how the early church worked. Even if Paul got an idea, he came back to the community to build it out. I didn't get that when I first started. I named all the products after biblical characters. I'd been in seminary. Nobody taught me any better. And this marketing person came in and said, this is horrible. This is supposed to be about the women of Thistle Farms, and here you have, the Moses lip balm, no more desert lips. The bath salts were Lot's wife. I thought they were amazing. And they were like, you need to be out of this work. You need to stop. So I want to conclude with how this work always calls us anew. This work always calls us anew. And so when I start seeing all the reports about the women refugees who are coming from Syria on those boats and trapped in refugee camps forever. And this is not a conversation, by the way, about immigration. Less than 1% of all the people, the 65 million people that are refugees in this world today will ever be immigrated. This is about women who have babies in refugee camps, women who are raising their babies in refugee camps, women who can flee war, but that violence and vulnerability of poverty goes with them. And they pass it down to their children, where there's not that ability to have the freedom that everybody longs for to how to live in this world. And so I was walking in the woods and I started thinking about the Episcopal Church's motto, which is, what is it? The Episcopal Church welcomes you. Is that right? And how, wouldn't it be great to take those life vests and weave them into welcome mats? Got in touch with some friends, and for the next months, Regina and I and 7 other people, a weaver that I had met at the Awakening Soul Conference that Tom and Ann Holtz do in North Carolina. We got her, one of the other CNN heroes, Luma Mufla, who works with refugees in Atlanta, and just a whole host. Franny Kijnek from California, an Episcopal priest out there. We got together and we went over there and we walked into, this is last week, by the way. I got home Sunday. I know, marhaba. Alhamdulillah to all of you. We got there, and there was so much fear around us doing new missional work in that refugee camp, as you can imagine. And it was a problem. They were saying, one, you can't pay women refugees. It's like, I bet you can. Which we did. You can't hire just 8 women to come together. It'll cause a riot in the refugee camp. I bet it won't. I bet those 8 women will be a part, like it always has been for thousands of years, since Magdalene and a group of women came together to be some of the first preachers of good news and healing and spreading how healing is possible for all. I bet it will be the same. I bet it will be the same as it was when we were in Rwanda. I bet it will be the same as it was when we were in Nashville, Tennessee. That small groups of women come together and they sit and they talk about their dreams and hopes. And they want to heal their community. You rape the women, you kill the village. You heal the women, you heal the village. That is the truth of it. So we gathered 9 new weavers. We sat in a circle like we do at Thistle Farms, and we lit a candle in the middle. And we said, what is it that you hope for by coming together? The very first thing they said is we want to be able to pay for a bus for transportation for this whole camp. That was the first thing said in the circle. We need a bus for transportation for this camp. We're like, done. What's next? One of the Kurdish Syrian women said, my grandmother was a weaver. We have forgotten how to weave. My hope is to learn to weave like my grandmother. The next woman, I want to make enough money to send to my husband who has immigrated to Sweden. I miss him and I want to be with him. He had left much earlier than she did. It's what we all want. It's this hope and how we are together and how we love. I loved it because Andy and I got to speak about 3 days before I left. And he said, what can I do? And I said, I need some people to order some of these welcome mats online. And he was like, done. What's your goal? Boom, boom, boom. And I was like, I love you. That's what I'm talking about in this missional work. Tell me what it is, the steps we can do, and let's get to it. You know, it's not a justice committee if you're not doing justice work. It's like having a love committee. I mean, you have to do loving things. We have to this is about the work. We want to do this together. And so what I want to commend to all of us in this work, and as you go back out, is to let new dreams come. And please don't waste your time worrying about how big or small that dream is. That to me feels very inconsequential now. I am doing the same work now with a couple thousand women that we did with 5 women when we started out. None of us are that different, and we can come together in big and small ways and do this work. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel in the wheel, the vision in the vision. It is old and deep. It is about love. Many of you have heard me tell the story of Doris, who is the great, look, there's one of the weavers. Oh yeah, let me say this. So this is it. This came from from Greece. I brought it back on Sunday, and I brought it here. And what we're going to do when y'all are mobbing the Thistle Farms table to buy all the stuff that we need you to buy, please, please, please. We want you to take selfies on these. And the hashtag is Love Welcomes. Love Welcomes. That's the hashtag. There's a conference right now in Nashville, Tennessee for Emma, the big newsletter peoples, and their whole marketing team is paying. We won't be able to do this for y'all. But I can promise you a free beer with Stephanie tonight. For everybody that stands on this. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Whenever, we'll put this by the Thistle Farms table, and you just stand on it, and you can stand on it any way you want. And I have to say creative is better, but some people are taking them this way. Some people are having somebody else take them, but just to say love welcomes. So all I want to, I'm just ending it on this, there's more images, is just that the whole story of Doris embodies everything I want to say to you, which is she had so much fear, she had so much trouble, she had so many things in her life. She had all of this fear, and one of them was of the ocean. Finally, when she put her foot in the water several years ago on one of these trips, she just lifted her hands and said, "Has this been doing this my whole life?" You know, Doris is a person who talks about herself as somebody who walked a 10-block radius for 20 years and couldn't find a way out. And I promise you, because it was Nashville, Tennessee, there was a church on every one of those blocks. So this year, you know, as Doris has grown and changed and led, she's the national coordinator of all the events. When we got invited to do a cruise in January, I was like, Doris, you have to go. And it's a justice cruise, and that means nothing except there's a talk about justice in the morning. Other than that, it's the same kind of cruise that you would go on for anything. And I keep thinking, while it was my first cruise, and somebody should have told me this explanation if you haven't been on a cruise. Would you like to go to the mall for a week? So, Doris, who had never, ever been in the water, never been in the ocean, who had overcome this to step into the water, got her passport and went out on the high seas this January. And as it always happens, the Lord called up a big storm on the first night for her. And I was like, Doris is going to lose her mind. She's going to lose her mind. And the next morning, when we got ready for our justice talk, Doris takes the stage, she walks up, and as the boat is rocking, I mean, it's rocking so much, the people that are on the staff have those thingies on their ear, and they were giving us these essential oils that were supposed to help because they knew we liked that kind of stuff. And she gets up on the stage, and she is rocking with the ship, and she starts singing this praise song that she has sung every morning since she walked off the streets. And it spells out the name of Jesus. It's this beautiful gospel praise song. She had the whole boat singing and rocking with her in the waters. And what I was thinking was about how sad it would be if truly That voice had been snuffed out so long ago, like so many of the people that she knew on the streets with her, and how important it is for us to go back out and find those voices and remember that we are older and deeper than that tide, that love is that powerful and that it can change the world, and what you can do is to continue to do all these beautiful, loving acts that you're about, to keep loving this world. Andy was right when he said the gospel doesn't call us to change the world. It calls us to change so we can love it better. And our job is not to worry about anything else, but being a part of that love and watching it transform us. Thank you all so much.